China's government is calling for a shift from science and technology as the primary productive forces to innovation as the primary driving force behind development. As a result, an exciting and groundbreaking environment for innovation and entrepreneurship, both in the traditional and emerging sectors of the economy, is being cultivated in China. Today, we have invited 3 entrepreneurs from different sectors to share their personal stories and opinions about how to tap into the benefits of this ecosystem in China. What special advantages does China offer innovators? How do entrepreneurs understand innovation with Chinese characteristics? Joining me today are Zheng Yudong, CEO of the wealth management business of Pintec, an intelligent financial services technology platform; Mattew Brannan, co-founder of China Channel, a platform providing services for organizations wishing to build their strategies for WeChat and China's digital ecosystem; and last but not least, Chen Qiufan, ex-vice president of Noitam and founder and CEO of Thema Mundi Productions, which focuses on creative production of sci-fi and fantasy film, TV, animation, and game. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. Now, the 3 of you are all working or running innovative startup companies in China, so you have a lot of personal stories to share with us. And you also started working in approximately the same period of time, right, since 2014 or 2012. So I would like to start by asking Zheng, for instance, you have both been working in traditional multinational companies and now fintech. How would you compare the different environment for innovation in the 2 different kind of platforms?
I think that will be very different. A multinational company, especially in financial service sector, needs to be very prudent, right? I mean, it's very obvious because they manage multi-billion dollars. And a single mistake in a percentage movement causes a lot of loss. So whenever some innovative idea has been brought up, there needs to go through a series of discussion at various levels involving various teams, departments, and many of them just there's no follow-up, right?
Because the idea just died out.
Because they deem it's too dangerous, or it's too innovative at this moment, or it may violate some kind of regulatory rules, possibility of regulatory rules.
What about fintech then?
But fintech is very different, I would say, because fintech is not a financial institution itself. It is actually using technology to enable the financial institutions. So it is fintech's job to be innovative and have a live and workable solution that is exhibited to the banks that, hey, it is safe, it is the right way to do it, and it can help you to improve efficiency, it can help you to bring more profit, and then we bring the solutions to the financial institutions that we service. So it's a very different environment.
But the fact that fintech is flourishing in China, is it because of the relative lagging behind, let's say, of China's financial regulatory framework, or is it because of the general atmosphere of innovation in China is just higher?
I would say the first point, I would say a more tolerant environment, right? If you look at other parts of the world, the financial regulations tend to be very rigid and strict. So for that, they created a word called sandbox. So to encourage innovation, I give you a sandbox. You can do it safely within the sandbox that's designed to you. But China is a more tolerant environment. It tends to encourage new things to have experience in this society first, and then the regulation will come in and see what we do about it. So it gives you a room to innovate and grow.
And basically make mistakes.
Exactly.
As well.
And in Singapore and Hong Kong, where I used to work to, I mean, the regulation tells that if the regulation didn't tell you you can do this, you cannot do this, right? In the financial sector. So that gives a lot of restrictions to the fintech innovation.
Right. Matthew, you are working in primarily with WeChat, of course. There are other platforms as well. And WeChat, for instance, related to what Mr. Zheng was talking about, has this WeChat Pay, which is quite revolutionary. So how do you relate to what Mr. Zheng has said? How do you look at the kind of, free spirit that is able to be encouraged through the WeChat system?
Yeah, I think WeChat Pay is like an excellent example of what you were just describing. Mobile payments sprung up, and both Alipay and WeChat Pay created their own independent systems, almost separate from the traditional banking sector. And at the beginning, it wasn't regulated by the government, but they let it go. But now, in the past year, I think we've started to see some regulation now with the Wanglian Central Clearinghouse, and with the requirement ratios for what they hold back on the float for both WeChat and Alipay is quite high now, actually higher than in other sectors. But that wasn't the case for the first few years where they're developing it. And if it was the case, it would have killed the development or harmed it, I would have said. So what the government did with this wait-and-see strategy, I think it's quite clever. I think a lot of governments around the world should really look at embracing a similar strategy towards technology, because it moves in directions that we can't anticipate. And as long as it's not harming consumers, as long as it's not disrupting society or have some other negative externalities which the government is responsible for, then I think it's their duty to encourage this kind of innovation which can benefit society, as mobile payments have undoubtedly done to Chinese people.
Right. I don't take wallet anymore. I just take my cell phone. But are you talking about this kind of laissez-faire attitude by the Chinese government being the key to the success of China's innovative ecosystem?
I think if you say laissez-faire, maybe that's a little bit misleading, because that sort of gives the impression of like suibian, like I don't care. It's, you know, easy going. I think the government closely watches the area if it's starting to have an impact, and they will move very swiftly if they need to. You can look at what's happened with the clamping down on Bitcoin exchanges as an example of that. They can move very swiftly if they need to, if they perceive that they need to. But the holding back, I think, is a deliberate and it's sort of carefully managed approach to allow the innovation to flourish during the early stages.
Right, so kind of watching from a distance, hands off for the moment, let's see what happens.
Yeah.
Almost similar to how China has done almost every single step of its reform and opening up, right, to let the facts tell what to do next. So, Qiufan, you work in motion capture, and your company also, or the ex-company that you were with, that is called Noitom, was part of the team that made the visual effects for Game of Thrones. What made your company able to deliver to that kind of world-class product?
I think firstly we have very solid foundation technology like algorithm, software and hardware R&D resources in this area. And secondly, we have a lot of talents from overseas or from domestic universities join us with a very low cost. And the last but not least, the policy encouragement from the government that allow us to start with very fast pace, for attracting talents, and we opened several branches in Shanghai, Beijing, and also in LA and Japan, so we can doing international business within the scale, and we also have emerging market which is huge compared with other countries.
But however, are we talking about China catching up very fast or China leading? Because when you innovate, you're not copying others. You're not adapting something that is already there. You're trying to build new things. Gentlemen, I don't know what... Matthew?
Yeah, I think before China was catching up, but that's not the case anymore. Certainly, being able to leapfrog certain stages of development has enabled them to start with a clean slate. Going back to the example of mobile payments that we were talking about earlier is another great example of that, where because the credit card culture wasn't built up in China and the infrastructure also was less developed, it enabled us to jump to where we are with mobile payments, which is clearly ahead of the rest of the world. Another example might be in peer-to-peer lending, for example, or now with new credit score systems coming out. China's, skipping over because they've missed this layer of development. the systems that are being built today, eventually they will become legacy systems one day and start holding back, because right now China's at the advantage where in many areas they don't have these incumbents holding people back. They don't have vested interests in different industries to stop this innovation. So that's another advantage.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mr. Zheng, how do you look at the kind of the reality is China is now leading. However, as Matthew just said, it is possible that WeChat, for instance, is going to block anybody to take over WeChat. How do you look at this kind of constant need for China to stay on top of everything?
Yeah, I think one advantage China has is the vast market. And people are really very adaptive and accepting of new things and new technology. They're willing to try. For example, in the financial sector, Chinese probably is the most acceptable to mobile, doing financial stuff on mobile. Many people hardly go to a bank branch anymore. They probably process all their daily financial needs through mobile or through some remote ways, right? So this advantage, and also it's a huge market. So whatever innovation you have built, you just have to check 1% of the population. Mm-hmm. It is well enough to have a startup to survive in this market. Yeah. So the big population combined with the people's mindset of accepting new stuff, I think that's the true advantage, that how China could continue to stay on top of the innovation.
However, the competition must also be huge. We hear news about the startups dying out, disappearing,
Definitely,
yeah.
Definitely. So I think, but that's another way, another angle to show that the innovation is really booming in China, because so many people are coming in to try every new angles because they see opportunities, right? Mm-hmm. If you don't have startup dying, that means you don't have startups at all, right? Entrepreneurship is a very difficult thing with a very high rate of failure, right? But the fact that people have the courage to come in, and the fact that young talents is open to decline their big company offers, a very stable income job, and join a startup company and do something very exciting and new, that says that the innovation is really booming in this country. In some other places that worked, I would say young people are trying very hard to get a very stable job in a big company, looking to climb the corporate ladder as their so-called final so-called destination. I think that is a way to kill the innovation in a way, because you don't have exciting things that to motivate people to join you, the innovation won't happen.
I think one thing that really fascinates people is the kind of vibe in the air, right? If you walk on the street, for instance, you see all kinds of advertisement just, everywhere. Some new website, some new application coming up, and the turnover probably is very, very high, but that's just to show the kind of the excitement, people's experiment, or the spirit of trying. And actually, Chen Qiufan, you are one of these people, right? You worked for Google, you worked for Baidu, each for a couple of years, and then you decided to jump out instead of staying with those big corporations. Were you afraid a little bit?
I totally agree with Zheng, what he just mentioned. Like people like me were working in this kind of big, huge international companies. Mm-hmm. They are already the most innovative company in the world, but still you feel like you can only be small part of it. Your job will be very specialized in a specific area. So the ceiling limit, you can see already there, your boss, and the life in 10 years is already there. But when you jump out of the pool, you can see a bigger sky, so you can see a lot of new opportunities, and you can see a lot of possibilities. Right. So when I dig into this virtual reality industry, I talk to a lot of persons who work for different companies, so I start to realize it might be the next big thing in the future. Mm-hmm. So I do a lot of study myself, and I talk to a lot of investors and engineers and also like some people, clients. So I realized that that's something I really want to do, and that's what can make me feel passionate. Yeah.
Right. Okay, we have been talking about China's innovation ecosystem, and you have been watching a special series on The Point on China's Boao Forum for Asia. It's a special program. We'll take a very short break and we'll be back right after this. Stay with us. Welcome back to a special program on The Point with me, Li Xin. We have been talking about China's innovation, and my three guests are Zheng Yudong, CEO of Pintec's wealth management business, Mattew Brannan, co-founder of China Channel, and Chen Qiufan, founder and CEO of Thema Mundi Productions. So, Mr. Zheng, let's look even further ahead. Right now in the financial sector, new technology is always emerging. Blockchain, for instance, we're talking about, and China, of course, is not going to miss out on that. What kind of challenges and opportunities is that posing to the Chinese businesses, entrepreneurs, and to the regulators?
I think the financial world is always a little bit sensitive in the way that it impacts a lot of people. It impacts the society, it impacts the economy, and it impacts the people. And in the past, we do see some events happen that bring some problems to the society, and the government has to move in very swiftly. So I think the first thing in the future is, for example, like what is a blockchain. We need to separate the technology with the application. I think that's the number one thing. For example, blockchain. Many people talk about Bitcoin. But Bitcoin is just one application of the blockchain technology. So when we talk about blockchain technology, one very useful application is to build a consensus among a very complicated transactions. For example, if a transaction requires 4 parties here to make some consensus, traditionally we need to do a lot of complicated process to make sure all of us agree, and we have various agreement among multiple parties to make sure the deal is done. But using blockchain, that consensus can be built digitally and unaltered and stored kind of literally forever. So that's a way to really improve the transaction efficiency, as I described just now.
Yeah. Matthew, given the kind of vibrant, innovative ecosystem and the very keen competition that is existing on the Chinese market, how challenging it is for international brands to take advantage of the system?
Yeah, I think it can be challenging. I think the Chinese environment is very different in many respects to outside. We've touched upon a couple of these already. The key one for startups being competition. Yes, the market's huge. Yes, it's fast-moving and full of opportunity. I generally believe that it's very full of opportunity, probably more than anywhere in the world. But the competition is also very fierce. When opportunities come out, Chinese people jump on them.
Already there are a lot of them.
Right. I mean, that's why we see Chinese people, as we talked about before, like to embrace new technology, because when they know new things, they know there's new opportunity there, there's new money-making opportunity. I think one thing in China is that businesses really, in the technology sector, they are more focused on the business aspects than we see in places like Silicon Valley, where you have people more interested in the technology just for technology's sake. Whereas Chinese are much more focused on, okay, we have this new technology, we have this great market, how can we make a lot of money?
So is that a good thing or a bad thing for China, for Chinese companies?
I think it is what it is. I don't judge it as being good or bad. I think it's, obviously it's good if you make a lot of money for yourself. I think if we look at the value, usually when you're making a lot of money, that means you're providing value to society. I mean, that's how the economic system works. In order to make money, you must be providing a service or product that people value. So usually making money is aligned with the goals of society.
But in the long run, do you see Chinese companies running potentially out of steam if the research part is not as strong?
I think the research part is coming along and making great strides as well. I wouldn't say that Chinese companies are weak in research by any means. I'm just saying that the management and the culture is more focused in that respect and more clear about their thinking. They don't get so caught up in like this is a cool technology. They're more focused, okay, what is the business model that will work to apply for this new technology?
Right. Is it something unique in China? Have you discussed?
Yeah, I just want to add a little bit. I think it's perfectly a very good thing that for Chinese company to focus on profit, because innovation requires investment, right? If the investment doesn't come from public sector, it must come from private sector. And private sector only invests in innovation if it can harness return, right? If there's no return brought to the investor will lose their interest to invest into innovative companies. And it is because that a lot of Chinese innovative companies can bring returns to the investor, and that's why the investors are so booming and active in this market, and they're willing to invest into more innovations. And that encourages a lot of new talents that join the innovation and do the startup companies. So I think it's a good thing.
Again, coming to your personal story, what was the story when you, for instance, start up this Thema Mundi? What kind of investment did you get? What kind of were you thinking on to capitalize on an existing technology and make the maximum return out of it?
Yeah, as Matthew said, like venture capital always require for return. So I set up this company because I see the emerging market of cultural product demanding from Chinese people right now. Because you can see from all the screens right now we have very limited like genre of TV show and films, and the government still have outgoing regulation for this kind of products. So there's huge demand for the new kind of like sci-fi, like fantasy stuff. You can see in the big screens they make most of the money in US and even in China. So that's for the future. So right now, I built up this company and also use some technology from Norton. So we try to build up a new system, a virtual production, so we can combine the virtual environment with the real active. So
right.
together,
the idea is very, very nice.
Yeah.
However, do you have a problem with funding, with investment? Did you manage to get investment easily?
Yeah, there's two major funding resources. One is from venture capital, the other one is from the government. I would say venture capital will require for shorter return in a period of time. But right now, in terms of like the more and more tired IPO process, so I would say they are more hesitating of putting more money into this like long-term return industry. So right now we're looking to some other fundings from the government because they have longer consideration of the whole ecosystem build up. So that's two major drive right now for our company's innovation.
But you managed to fund your... How do you find it different from how businesses are funded or startups are funded in the West?
I think before the venture capital ecosystem in China, if you look back to the beginnings of the big internet companies in China, it was quite weak. That's why Tencent is invested from a South African company, why Alibaba is invested from SoftBank in Japan. But these days it's completely different. I think it's very mature. And all the stages of investment, going from very small seed stage up until IPO is there. And actually, there's lots of money in China chasing startups and chasing investments where they can get a return. I think it's similar to the actual startup system itself in that there's fierce competition.
Again, for your clients, the brands who want to come and take advantage of the Chinese digital platforms, what would be the #1 advice you would give them?
I think digital online in China, it's moving much faster. It evolves rapidly. What works now and what works in 6 months can be quite different, and also it gets more expensive. So clients are often surprised by that to get the same results in China as you would on platforms outside China, it's actually more expensive here. In some ways, you could argue that it's more mature here.
But the return, the potential return would...
Again, it's a huge market. The returns, if you get it right, are massive. There are, there's case studies of brands that have done exceptionally well here. But having said that, it's, you do need to be patient at the same time as well. I think the brands that invest in long-term strategies and invest in their brands across a variety of online and offline, because in China, we get caught up with the online stuff and how everything's so advanced here, but I think online and offline worlds, in terms of brand marketing strategy, you can't forget the more traditional channels, and also these worlds are merging. So we're seeing that in aspects of like new retail models, for example, where the experiences that customers expect here in China is a seamless online and offline one, not just using their phones.
I see. So we just have a couple of minutes to wrap up, maybe a concluding paragraph from each and every one of you. Mr. Zheng, so in one phrase, maybe, can you characterize China's innovation ecosystem and the way forward, what needs to be watched out for?
I think overall it's a very exciting moment and exciting place. And this is a great market to be in. So I think the time is right for entrepreneurs, both within China and abroad, to explore this market.
Matthew, anything left unsaid yet?
One of the interesting things I think about the China market is that the consumers are very responsive to like small price changes and incentives. You can bribe Chinese consumers with like a little discount coupon or a few yuan off here, and that creates opportunities. I think that's why the market can move very fast in terms of consumer-focused products, and you can gain market share by throwing large amounts of capital at it. And we see this play out time and time again in all these different markets. So it's a very interesting market with unique characteristics that we don't see in other places of the world. But certainly, moving forward in the next few years, I think a lot of the trends in startup space and with new technologies will be coming from China.
And Qiufan, coming from somebody who is in this startup picture, what is your biggest wish looking ahead for the next year, maybe?
Yeah, I think content industry is it's a future. So besides the technology, it also requires for creativity and also patience, because sometimes you have all these things and with great distribution channel, you still couldn't catch the hit. So you need some patience to dig into every consumer's mindset. So I believe this is a next level innovation will lead China to the international content industry. Yeah.
Thank you very much. We have to leave it there. My three guests today: Zheng Yudong, CEO of Pintec's Wealth Management Business; Mattew Brannan, co-founder of China Channel; and Chen Qiufan, founder and CEO of Thema Mundi Productions. And that is it for this special edition of The Point with me, Li Xin. As always, you can follow me on Facebook and Twitter using the handle The Point with LX. Download the application called CGTN to watch the show on your mobile devices, or go to YouTube and look for CGTN The Point. Thanks for watching. You've got The Point.